update on these little field trips that you've been taking with Mike.
I told you already, we pick up money, check on things, stuff like that.
And you're his bodyguard, right? But what? That's what you said.
I said I guarded him. Like backup. Like a second set of eyes. Everybody needs backup, right?
They told you Jesse was the comic relief. But what if the show's biggest joke was actually Walter White himself? There is an entire religion of Breaking Bad devotees devoted not to Walter White's descent into moral ruin, nor to Gus Fring's immaculate villainy, but to Jesse Pinkman's linguistic art form, his gloriously unfiltered blend of idiocy and insight. Strip away the profanity, and you're left with one of television's most compelling paradoxes. A man too foolish to survive on paper, and too intuitively human to ever count out enough. It begins, fittingly, with Cowhouse. The pilot episode gifted viewers with Jesse confidently referring to a barn as a cowhouse, and the brilliance of the line lies not merely in its absurdity, but in its delivery. Jesse says it as though he's explaining the theory of relativity to an especially dense child. Walter White, of course, stares at him with the exhausted confusion of every educator forced to confront the limits of their profession. What Jesse lacks in terminology, he makes up for in conviction, an early thesis for his entire character. And, amusingly enough, the cowhouse wasn't even wrong. Technically, a cowshed is indeed a real agricultural structure. So, as usual, Jesse's wrongness was right in disguise. This linguistic pattern runs throughout the series. He wields vocabulary like a toddler with a flamethrower, wildly, but with surprising accuracy. Consider his Kafkaesque tax complaint, a moment that begins as comic nonsense and ends as accidental brilliance. At first, he scoffs when Win Duffy uses the term. Moments later, he's parroting it himself, as though he's always been fluent in bureaucratic existentialism. Jesse's not uneducated so much as undisciplined. His speech is the rough draft of a surprisingly sharp mind that never had a chance to edit itself. Then there's his legendary observation. You don't need a criminal lawyer. You need a criminal lawyer. The line does double duty, functioning as both genuine legal advice and a perfect encapsulation of Jesse's worldview. The world is corrupt. Might as well get a professional who's fluent in corruption. His voice gives the phrase the gravity of gospel and the rhythm of a punchline. It's one of the few moments in which the show acknowledges, without irony, that Jesse might actually understand how the game is played. Of course, not every bit of dialogue is accidental wisdom. Some of it is pure comic chaos. Rice and beans? Jesse's skeptical reaction to Walt's Ricin lecture is still one of the series' finest distillations of character. Walter attempts to conduct a chemistry seminar on murder, and Jesse hears lunch. His face, a mix of incredulity and hunger, communicates what dialogue never could. He's out of his depth, and he knows it. The real tragedy is that he keeps going anyway. The comedic peaks reach further absurdity in his delighted confusion during the robot conversation. The moment, reportedly improvised on set, captures the heart of Jesse's charm, an unshakable confidence in his own nonsense. Whether he's proposing to use a giant magnet or naming barns, Jesse operates with the same assured idiocy that somehow ends up being right just often enough to keep him alive. Yet amid the comic gold, the show delivers Jesse's most devastating line. Ever since I met you, everything I have ever cared about is gone. Aaron Paul delivers it with a rawness that strips the character bare. Regret, rage, and self-awareness finally coalescing into something painfully articulate. It's the line where all the yos and bitches fall away, replaced by the voice of a man who's seen his soul pawned off for a chemistry experiment. Walter's great moral unraveling is intellectual. Jesse's is emotional and infinitely more human. Even his seemingly throwaway lines, "Yeah, science," or "Nobody's killing Badger, yo," serve as tonal punctuation for the series. They remind viewers that beneath all the moral rot and meticulous plotting, there's still a kid reacting to a nightmare world with the vocabulary of a playground fight. It's ridiculous, but it's also real. His relationship with Walter remains the show's great psychological Rorschach. From the moment Walt appears in that DEA van, Jesse should have asked more questions. Why was a high school chemistry teacher at a drug bust? How did he know Emilio's name? Why did he show up with the confidence of a man who already knew Jesse's secret identity? But Jesse never asks. He's too stunned, too high, too cornered, or perhaps too eager for approval from the only authority figure who ever treated him as more than a failure. His eventual fury at discovering Walt's DEA connection isn't hypocrisy. It's delayed clarity. It's the moment he realizes that his supposed partner has always been his captor. Critics love to label Jesse stupid, but that's lazy shorthand for unpolished. He's clever when it counts. The mobile lab was his idea, not Walt's. He refused to cook at his house. He insisted on proper safety gear, mocked Walt's incompetence in a hardware store, and displayed legitimate street intelligence that often saved both their lives. His only real flaw was trusting a man who weaponized his intellect like a scalpel. By the end of the series, the evolution is undeniable. The boy who once couldn't distinguish between a barn and a cowhouse becomes the man who looks his tormentor in the eye and says, "Then do it yourself." It's not just a final line. It's emancipation condensed into 4 words. For once, Jesse doesn't need Walt to tell him what to do. He doesn't need anyone. There's poetry even in his smaller moments of absurdity. Funyuns are awesome, he declares, with the enthusiasm of a stoned philosopher discovering hedonism. Or his bizarre linguistic grievance. Since when did they change it to a possum? Sounds Irish or something. It's nonsense, yes, but there's also a trace of childlike bewilderment at a world that insists on making everything more complicated than it needs to be. And that, in essence, is Jesse Pinkman's tragedy and triumph. He lives in a world run by people like Walter White, men who worship complexity for its own sake, while he himself believes in the purity of simple things. Loyalty, fairness, Funyuns. He's mocked for it, exploited for it, nearly destroyed for it, but somehow that simplicity is the one thing the universe never beats out of him. Even the show's opening dynamic, Walt, the brilliant teacher, and Jesse, the bumbling student, eventually collapses under scrutiny. The idiot ends the series morally intact, while the genius dies as a cautionary tale. Vince Gilligan's great joke is that it takes a supposed fool to show us what decency looks like. And yes, there's still that license plate, the Cap'n, a monument to Jesse's spectacular lack of subtlety. It's the kind of blunder that would get any real criminal arrested before lunch, and yet it perfectly frames the series' absurd premise. 2 men trying to build an empire with all the stealth of a marching band. It's also Gilligan's sly commentary. For all their scheming, neither Walt nor Jesse is particularly smart about crime. They just happen to be too desperate to quit. In the end, Jesse Pinkman isn't a sidekick or comic relief. He's the moral barometer of the show, a human measuring stick against which every brilliant decision collapses. His cowhouse confusion and his criminal lawyer clarity belong to the same mind, one unpolished, unpretentious, and uncorrupted by self-delusion. Breaking Bad may have begun as the story of a teacher breaking bad, but it ended as the story of a student breaking free. The man who once thought barns were cowhouses eventually learned to see the whole world for what it truly was, a place full of people too proud, too clever, and too blind to realize that sometimes the fool was the only one who understood the joke. Not everyone needs to break bad. Some just need to break free. Subscribe.